Welcome back to Chasing Common Ground. And Shane will have realized that I've renamed the show a little bit. It used to be called The Lifestyle Chase. And I found that people either thought that my name was Chase or they're like, what is this show all about? And so I thought that if I call it Chasing Common Ground, they'll understand sort of like how I will sometimes weave in and out of the fitness industry, and sometimes I will talk about people that or talk to people that I've known for a long time. Sometimes I'll talk to people who I've just met. But Shane is someone who I go back quite a ways with now because time flies. It seems like just yesterday we were new acquaintances. And then now, like, we've seen each other go through a lot of cool milestones. I got to go to the premiere of the Olympia movie, Breaking Olympia, which I thought was really, really cool. And there's just so much that has happened. So welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Chris, I'm great. Couldn't be better. I'm sitting here with you as a two-time guest now. And so it's just great to see how far you've come. I think you're at what, like 300 something episodes by now?
Yeah, it's like 300 plus. I stopped labeling the episodes, and I have to say, I think you're actually a four-time guest now.
Go
If
on.
I look back, there was one episode where I said it was like, it was your third appearance or something. Either I miscounted. Either way, you're important to the show, important to me, and it's just cool that we have so many snapshots of different moments of our lives on the internet, safely kept, well maintained, and to be able to do this circle back moment is cool. So I'm curious. I'm going to dive right into it with some hard hitting questions. I would love to know, in the past few years, since like 2022, who has been someone that you've met in your work that has sort of changed the way that you perceive life?
That's a tough one. We're fortunate to meet a lot of people that might be labeled inspiring, having just done a ton of docs and a ton of interviews for them. Someone that's changed my, okay, I'll give you a good answer. I think it's a good answer to me. Cameron Hughes. So Cameron Hughes is a fella who, if you watch hockey or basketball or the US Open, you might see him in the crowd just absolutely going nuts, dancing in the aisles, ripping off shirts, throwing them to people. He's got like 20 shirts on. And I first became aware of Cam, like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I saw him at a game in Edmonton, an Oilers game. And I'm like, that's so cool. Like, look at this guy just giving it. Then I found out that he's a professional, like he does this as a job. And so full transparency, like my opinion of that went down a little bit. I'm like, oh, this guy gets paid to dance and whip off his shirt. Then, however, during the 2024 Oilers playoff run, I had the privilege of meeting him down in Florida. Actually, we shared a flight down to Florida for game 7 of the Oilers Panthers. Untimely demise for us. But Cam just brings so much energy and love and kindness and cheer to the world, to every interaction, every single person that he meets, that I became an absolute huge fan of his. He's got a book, actually, it's sitting here on my desk. Full plug for Cam, King of Cheer. I won't give too much away, but it's a fabulous book about adversity, overcoming the odds, being down on your luck and rising above, and more than anything, just following your passion. So between Cam's book and then my little Ted Lasso bobblehead here, I try and take lessons from both of them every day.
That's amazing. And it's cool because I think I might have sort of like a trainer connection with Cameron Hughes because one of my friends out of Vancouver, Mike Howard, I think he's worked with him as a trainer in the past. Maybe they continue to work together. Maybe it was just like a momentary thing. But I love how these connections come up. Like the more we meet people, the more we notice that there's lots of like mutual connections or common interests or like common visions, common goals. So my next question for you is, what has been something that has come onto your radar that was kind of a result of you and somebody else sharing a common vision, something where you're like, wow, somebody else kind of sees things the same way as I do?
Yeah, there's people you meet throughout life that, are you don't care for, or they're just sort of baseline, like neutral, don't really love them, don't feel any negative way about them. And then there's people you meet that you just kind of resonate with, that you go to have a coffee for 30 minutes and you end up chatting for 3 hours. The last person, well, not the last person that happened to me with, but the last one I remember is a friend of Kosh Sherman. He was a friend of my sister's. He was in the film industry, living in Toronto. And I was kind of getting into the film industry at that time. And she said, "Oh, you guys should meet. He's from Edmonton. He's doing cool things in Toronto. You're doing cool things in Edmonton here." So Akash had moved back to Edmonton from Toronto in 2021 or 22, something like that. And, it was more than anything kind of a courtesy to my sister. Just, I'll go have coffee with this guy, see what he's doing. He was in the scripted side of film, whereas I'm in the documentary side. So oftentimes those don't really mesh, but just a bit of a kindred spirit. Like, again, went for coffee right next to the Metro Cinema on 109th Street by White Ave. And what I thought would be, 45 minutes of chat, we sat there for 3 hours talking about life, philosophy, sports. Film was kind of like the last on the list. And so it's tough to describe because you can never predict when that type of resonance is going to happen with someone. But when it does, like, God, keep those people close, because, anyone that kind of fills your emotional, energetic bucket up is worth having on speed dial.
Absolutely. That's kind of what I'm experiencing with my podcast, just as I reflect back. Because what I'm doing, and I'm going to do a plug for it here because I'm going to probably add some promotions into the show, but this makes it easy. But I've been writing on Substack daily. And when I initially started doing that, I was thinking, like, this is going to agitate some people because some people can only take me in small doses. And some people like what I'm all about. They want to kind of soak it up. And what I kind of tended to do was, most of my articles, I would find correlations between like a lesson that was learned in one of the early episodes. So like I've already covered our episode and some of the lessons that came up. And then I correlated that with maybe something that was a topic on my mind that day to sort of either help people see things in a new perspective or help them see value in going back into the time capsule and listening to conversations from before, even if it was just to kind of see the evolution of people who don't quit. Because in a lot of cases, like when I'm reflecting on an episode, like I could reflect on our episode together and talk about how your career has evolved since then, because there's so many things that have happened. There's been so many films that have been released, so many things that we both celebrated, encountered, overcome, etc. But with that said, when I was at the film premiere for Breaking Olympia, there was just so much energy. It was like the anticipation, the buzz, and then having the moment where Phil Heath at the end was like talking to the crowd. I was like, that was cool because I went there solo. I felt a little awkward, out of place. But I was like, look, I'm just going to be here. I don't care about the logistics or how it feels or how it looks because I just want to be in this moment. And I'm glad I was.
Well, you're sitting in a dark theater, right? Like, who
Yeah,
cares?
nobody knows.
Um,
Yeah.
and feeling awkward, like Phil and I both got on stage just representing the filmmaker and obviously the docs about him. Well, number one, Phil could talk for hours on end. And number two, my mic wasn't working. So as we're standing up there for like the 30-minute Q&A, like I realized 5 minutes in, like I haven't said a word. And because obviously everyone wants to ask Phil questions, which makes sense. I get that. But I'm like going through my head, I'm like, do I just go sit down now or do I wait? So I had like 30 minutes of just standing like this, feeling awkward. I think I eventually put the mic in my pants, but I really appreciate you coming to that. It means the world. And I live in a bit of a bubble out in Sherwood Park now. And so I don't see nearly as many people that I used to run into on a kind of weekly, monthly basis. So those premieres for me are just like the ultimate, like kind of social event. Like it's so nice to get to catch up with everyone, or even if I don't, because sometimes we're running around with our heads cut off. Just knowing that there's people that you're friends with there to support you means the world. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Like the biggest thing that I took away from that, like, even just like a friend spotting is heartwarming at times. Like, I was able to spot you. You knew that I was there. That's all that mattered in the moment because presence and energetic, like that energetic exchange can make a big difference. But I want to know with that premiere and all the other premieres that you've been involved with, because I only got to see a tiny piece of pie as to what your life is like and what it's like to do the work that you do. With all of those things, what have been some things that you've learned about yourself as you've gotten introspective, as you've kind of noticed like, oh, I messed up with or the microphone wasn't working, or like these little things that come up? What have you learned about yourself?
Well, my faults are all personal, like nothing on the technical side, just because we work with incredible creative technical people as a producer. And I'm sure I've said this before, but like we're the least creative people in the group, right? We come up with the money, we book the travel, we get the team together, we carry bags and get coffee. So fortunately, there's never been a like, oh, we forgot to record, or oh, the mic's not connected. I've learned for myself that like Stephen Pressfield is the war of art. Like there's the resistance, right? And I don't know, like I haven't pinpointed when it hits me the hardest, but there are times when I know it's hitting me the hardest. And I'm still trying to figure out if I'm better off just going with the ebbs and flows of that motivation. Like, you hear, hustle culture and trying to work so hard. And yeah, I think it's great, especially if you're starting from, from the beginning. You really got to put the hours in. But I'm trying to learn about myself. Like, if I'm just really not feeling it, should I just like go do something else for the rest of the day? Like, and of course, then when the iron's hot, you strike. And for me, that could be like working from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., quick break for lunch or to walk the dog or whatever. But there are those days where you're just in flow state and you feel like you can keep going, right? Like you're not thinking like, I'm almost done today's to-do list. So I guess the thing I've learned is to be a little bit more like Bruce Lee, be like water and just go kind of where that current's taking you in terms of inspiration or motivation. There are times, especially with deadlines, you got to bear down and just get the work done and cross off the whole to-do list. But especially on the creative side of things, like you probably know, you're doing writing per Substack. Some days it's like the keys just aren't coming together nicely. Yeah. So still trying to figure that out. Also trying to figure out what I want out of life, right? Like admittedly, I have a really like undefined sort of life goal as far as like the career goes, right? Like we try not to, my producer partner, Adam, and I, we try not to value our projects by critical accolades just because those can be so fickle, right? There's that constant dichotomy between commercial and critical success. Sometimes the films that win Oscars are the films that almost nobody's seen, and sometimes the billion-dollar movies win no awards. So I think like in terms of longevity for a career, it's just making sure that on the business side, our films make sense and recoup all its investors and make a little money would be nice so we can get everyone a bit of a bonus. But, I'm at a point now where we're so busy with work that I'm able to turn things down. Like it used to be, we'd have a doc on the go, but then I'd be picking up like PA jobs or someone needed to on-set producer for a couple hours or a couple days or whatever, a quick directing job for a commercial. But now, like I find we've got so many of our own that I'm in a position where I'm like, you know what? Sure, I could use an extra few bucks, whatever. But is that worth reducing my overall bandwidth for the ones that are really important? And then by extension, the enjoyment of what I'm doing, right? Like, so it kind of boils down to like, how much do you need to be comfortable and happy?
I like that. And I kind of go through similar processes myself, like starting at where you talked about sort of the reception and the revenue generation of different films. I find that when I have like something that's tangible that happens in my life or career where I'm like, wow, this is amazing, people are underwhelmed. And when I have like an underwhelming thing in my life or career, then people are like, wow, you're killing it. And I'm like, I don't feel like I'm killing it. Like my bank account doesn't say I'm killing it. And so like people's perceptions of each other online is so like skewed and oftentimes like inverted. And I think that's something important for people to realize. And I try to like, that's why I like to have like mixed media. Like I like to have some written, some long form podcast and some short form social media. Because if somebody tried to like get a read on me based on my like social media, they probably get it wrong. And a lot of people have. Like they kind of figure they got me figured out and then they get to know me and they're like, you're nothing like what you seem in a good way. Because like it's just we can only get so much of a picture of a person based on one snapshot. And what I've found to help to build out that snapshot is I've done a lot of walks and talks with people over the years. Just we grab a coffee and we'll talk. And I've talked to colleagues, friends, all kinds of people, mentors. And in doing that, you get such a deeper understanding of what they've been through, how they see the world, how they react to things, how they treat other people. When you're ordering the coffee, you see how they act, how they conduct themselves. So in your line of work, I can imagine stuff like that comes up. What has been some of the scenarios that have popped up in like the kind of the behind the scenes when you're picking up the coffee for people, when you're going to new settings, stuff like that?
You mean like where I really get to know someone kind of over and above what they're, I would say people's like ability to be flexible is and graciousness with their time seems to be a really good indicator overall, a good proxy measure for like what kind of person they are in all facets, right? The people who are pinching pennies with their time, like, oh, you said we were going to be 2 hours in this interview. It's already been an hour 30. Do you really need 2 hours? It's like, well, you know, yeah, again, on the one hand, I'm kind of torn because this person is giving us their time, right? But on the other hand, it's like, you know, if you're going to give something up to someone, like you do it without expecting anything in return. And, don't add extra pressure. Don't make the crew feel bad. Like, make me feel bad. That's fine. If we go over time, like get mad at me as a producer, right? But someone who's just kind of rude to whether it's the sound technician or, the DOPs. And then, we've met people that like they have no reason to give us anything or like, they have no vested interest in it, but they just give us all the time in the world. And like, these are like, well, important people, tons of money, like they're very busy schedules. Like we were in Cologne and we were kind of struggling to find a location for 2 interviews there. And this fella, I won't mention him by name, but is opening up a new winery there. It's all privately funded and no one knows how much money he sunk in, but it's something close to $1 billion. Like this is going to be like a first of its kind, only of its kind, estate multifunction facility in the world. So one of the guys we were meant to be interviewing said, well, call him. See, he's got a new spot. We might be able to find a location in there. I had no idea who this guy was. So I call him. He's like, yeah, give me a call when you're in town. So he's like, Kate, come meet me at this place. It was his beginner winery, he called it, because his main one was taking too long. He's like, well, screw it. I'm going to go open a smaller one in the meantime, just to get the wheels turning. He said, I'm thinking we're going to get in, go to the new place. He's like, you guys hungry? He just flew in. Let's have lunch. So we sit down with him. He buys us lunch. Then he takes us on an hour tour of the beginning winery. Then you get in the car, drive up with him 20 minutes to the new spot. And he takes us on another hour and a half tour of that place, right? And then finally at the end, he's like, okay, I saved the places I think might look cool for an interview spot. And so he took us to the last few places. So I spent like 3.5 hours with this guy who's building this insanely valuable property. And I'm sure had a million other things going on. But he was just like, because he respected the people that we were doing an interview with, he extended that respect to us. And it was just like, I don't know, it just blew my mind. I'm like, when you get frustrated because someone's taking, an extra 30 seconds in the grocery store checkout or doesn't turn left on an advanced green and you're stuck for another 2 minutes, like those kind of things, it's like, if that guy can do that for us, maybe we can all afford a little bit more grace to other people in our lives.
Yeah, I like that. And like I have similar scenarios where I encounter situations where like somebody's way further along in life than I ever perceived possible. And maybe not necessarily measured monetarily, but maybe in their perception of time and how like we only have so much time. So like being generous and making each experience like meaningful is a better investment than kind of sharing it sparingly as if like you need to save all these moments for somebody else down the line kind of thing. Just sort of experiencing these different perspectives from meeting different people and having these different connections has definitely it was a big part of why I rebranded the podcast because I was like I can see in my future I'm going to probably go places like travel places, meet someone spontaneously, want to incorporate them into like this legacy project and it's not going to make sense from a fitness standpoint, or it's not going to make sense based on the existing theme. So if people understand that I'm chasing common ground, that they'll understand like the vision behind it. That said, have you gone anywhere that you've never been before in the last few years where it's changed how you go about your day to day? Like something where you saw someone do something differently, or you saw the world works differently in another place, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've been anywhere like that far flung. The last place was probably, well, work-wise was probably Europe, like kind of Sweden, Spain, UK. I think that was 2021. But those are all still kind of Western civilization. I think like Europe in general, people are just a little bit more like low key, like less high strung. Take their time with lunch and have late long dinners, and I like that to a degree, but you know, R&R can only take you so far, I think. Like if you really love what you're doing, then you're kind of just always thinking about getting back to it. I'd say like my wife and I went to Portugal for our honeymoon, and it was cool just to like, it was the only time I've ever really 98% unplugged from work. I still kind of kept an eye on stuff and forwarded to people who could handle stuff, but wasn't replying. And yeah, that was nice to like really, really disconnect. I mean, it all comes down to like, on your phone and like having a connection to work in order to disconnect. Like, yeah, I think next time I go on a vacation, whenever that is, I might just like fully like disable my inbox and texts. I mean, I'll have to figure out how to like stay in touch with people I'm on a trip with. But it's those moments, even when your phone dies for a few hours and you're out and about, like I'm beginning to realize how valuable that disconnection is. And not in some like, oh, I'm out in the forest disconnected and breathing in the air and touching the moss. Like that's great too. But just simply like not having this like obligation in your pocket that like as soon as someone responds or sends you something, you feel like you have to respond or make a plan to respond in the next 24 hours.
I like it. I mean, there's been times when I have kind of like looked through my phone and disabled notifications from certain senders, or only enabled notifications for a select few people, or maybe leaned on like a different communication app. Like I've used Voxer in the past instead of like a text message or WhatsApp kind of thing.
What's
And
Vox do?
then so Voxer, it's just like this kind of walkie-talkie style text messaging service, very similar to WhatsApp, and it's just then you can do international communication. I've used that for some of my international contracting in the past. You,
Worldwide now, Chris. This is
I'm
great. I want to hear a little bit about this.
well, I mean, I'll give you a quick little snapshot of what's gone down over here over the last bit, because maybe some of the audience doesn't know. So when you and I last talked, I don't think I had been, maybe I was doing a contract with Lululemon, but if I was, it was just momentary. And then I finished up that. And then I started working with my friend Beverly Simpson. She's out of New York. At the same time, I was working with my friend Alex McBarty out of Michigan, who I still work with. And I had been doing the social media contracting with my friend Kim Quibble, and well, actually, she's married now, so she's Kim Hayes. And so I stepped away from that this past December. Stepped away from my work with Beverly this past June, because I've been kind of doubling down on the stuff that I'm doing for myself. I produce a podcast for a gentleman out of Atlanta, and I produce Andrew Coates' podcast. And then I have like a AI podcast. Basically, it's a secret podcast that gives health and wellness advice, but just nobody knows about it. And it's actually got a bigger audience than this one does.
No way.
And I'm going to be shifting that to where I take it over and I'm the host, because people have had a strong reception to topics like living alcohol free, or how to pursue fitness and wellness when you're facing like loneliness or isolation. And I realized like I wrote all the scripts and I wrote everything out, but I used an AI voice for it. But if I attach it to my voice and then pair it with some of the ways that I can help people, it could be a very like mutually beneficial thing where people can get free support, But then if they want to take that next step, then it's a great lead generation tool. And then
I'm
personally, I've
curious.
had,
I'm
go ahead.
curious, interrupt, but did you find writing the script when you knew it was going to be an AI voice? Was the writing easier? Did it come more free flowing when you weren't worried about like I'm the one who's got to say this?
I noticed that I had to incorporate a certain like depth to it because if you just write things just for somebody else to say and it lacks personality, it lacks any kind of like relatability, it's terrible to listen to. It just feels dry and empty and hollow. So I essentially wrote it as if I was saying it, but then I thought that maybe because like the voice that I used sounds like a movie trailer voice. And so it's almost like it's exciting to hear. Like it's listenable. It's not like it aggravates your ears to like listen to it. And it's like short form. It's like about 5 to 6 minutes per episode. But kind of going through it, I figured that I removed the bias of like them hearing it from me and they'd hear it from this anonymous party. And then as time went on, I was like, okay, like at some point, I'm going to kickstart this thing again. Like the last time I put out an episode for that show was probably 2 years ago. But it's got like 20 episodes and they're still getting listens today. Like today, they've probably gotten like 50 listens per episode. And so as I take that over and pair it with some of the things I'm doing with online clients across US, Canada, and even just like if local people come across it and want to connect, as I do that, I will infuse more of my human experience, which I think is a big differentiator in today's world. Like we can all leverage technology. We found that out, but then we found out how hollow that makes us feel. And so then if you work collaboratively with it and infuse a person's like unique personal experiences with it, it can be very powerful. And the other thing is like there's so many skills that need to be taught again, like socializing and meeting new people and getting out of your comfort zone, stuff like that. But that's kind of like the short version of what I've been up to. I tried to kind of fill you in as efficiently as I could.
No, that's great. I love it. It's funny, like you and I kind of met when we were both really changing our lives around to a degree. So it's you probably like me, you kind of just get accustomed to the new normal of like what that life entails. But it's fun to look back and say like, God, like, I remember taking the bus, like I had to sell my car because I couldn't afford it while I was, starting this new thing in film, bartending, part-time at local on Jasper Ave. And like I'll drive around the city now, not that I'm in the city often, but I'll be like, I tell my wife, I'm like, I used to wait for a bus for 20 minutes at this spot and go over here in like winter and summer. And she's like, God, I'm glad you met years later.
No, it's funny how that works, and I experienced lots of sort of like perspective shifts too. Like I just started training people out of a different space. Like I had been at Evolve Strength for like 6.5 years, and I shifted my in-person business to AIM Fitness. And I know the owner, him and I work well together, our personalities click, and we're both kind of like driven towards the same like missions and stuff. And it's also an opportunity for me to have like a dedicated space where I can like if I look at the Google Calendar and I see that there's no trainers delivering sessions this evening, for example, I can pop in there with my key fob and I can spend like 2 hours filming content, whether that be for like educational stuff, exercise demos, promotional stuff. And it just gives me so much more flexibility where I know what's happening in the gym. It's air conditioned. It has what I need. It's pretty. Like it's not like super fancy or anything, but it's well thought out and it's well kept, and that's all a guy like me needs. And as I do that, I see like businesses connected to like my warehouse background, like places I used to pick up and drop off at. And like they've relocated. So there's this one company that sells like rubber caps. And where I first knew it to be, I would pick up rubber caps, but then like 2 years later, it had a gym in there and I contracted out of that gym for 4 years. And then that gym moved. But now I'm at a different gym and that rubber cap place is right next to it. I'm like, these guys are following me everywhere. And like even within
Right.
even within the industry that I was in, their biggest competitor was across the fence from Evolve. And so it's like that was always a powerful reminder to me of like look at where I am now. Like now that line of work is in my rearview mirror. And it's not so much because I had a chance to reflect on this. I kind of got creative yesterday and I helped my friend Tim Gorley. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He has Fits at Ninja.
Mhm.
So he got a new sea container of turf. And he is in the middle of some shifts and changes to his business. So we were in a different warehouse space, unloading all this stuff. And I decided, like, I agreed to help him with the forklifting, even though I haven't sat on a forklift in like 4 or 5 years, but I still got it. So we offloaded the whole thing, like tons of turf and stuff. And I was doing this partially to reconnect, kind of like we're doing here. And he'll be back on the podcast later too. But just to kind of see how far he's come with his different businesses and to kind of see like how my life is different. Like now I'm not doing these gigs out of desperation. I'm doing these gigs out of novelty. I'm like, yeah, let's do something cool today. I actually have like the morning free. Let's do this. And like I still was doing other work that day where I could cover my bills, even if it was an unpaid little gig.
Mhm.
And so it's just to feel control of my time that's differently than what it used to be is empowering. And then to see friends doing the same thing is also empowering. But then we're all still taking risks. Like we're still kind of like having some skin in the game. We do have something to lose in most cases. But that kind of makes it exciting. And without that, there's nothing to gain. And so now I'm going to put it back to you because you kind of turned the table on me. So I got to get you back. So my question for you is, what's the most recent time you've had to put some skin in the game where you're like, okay, I have something to lose. This hat, like, I'd really love it if this went well. And regardless of how well it went, what were your feelings in that moment? Like in the moment of noticing that you had put a lot on the line, what was your self-talk like and what were you going through?
Oh God. I mean, every film we do where there's skin in the game, right? Like, we have to get intern financing to cover tax credits. That's all money that comes after you're done and, submit all your accounting work and audits. And so in order to get approved for these loans, you got to put up your house as collateral, right? So I've been a homeowner since 2022. So yeah, every new project, there's a ton of skin in the game, right? And I think I'm fortunate because the self-talk was pretty mitigated in terms of I was lucky to work with a guy who'd been doing it for 10 years and, was able to assure me, look, like, as long as like things don't fall apart completely, you're still going to deliver, you're still going to get, authorized for all that funding to come back. Like, you're not going to lose your house. So you kind of just learn to not think about it, right? Like, it's kind of the same with, once you're able to, in a good enough position, you can put a bit of money away, right? It's like, I remember the first time I started investing on my own, where it was like, you put in a few $1,000, it's all you've got invested. And you're like, God, what if it goes down 20%, right? And as you build that up more and more over years and compound interest. And then you see proportionately bigger, the same swings, but they're bigger absolute dollars. And you just learn that, like, hey, that's part of the game. Like, sure, you could go throw money into an index fund, low risk, S&P, something like that, and even that's going to have oscillations in it. But you just kind of say, like, everything's going to be all right. Like, as long as my fundamental principles are sound in what I'm doing, like, there's always everything we're gonna do. Like driving in the car, walk across the street, doing a squat or a deadlift. Like, there's always that possibility. Like, the worst possible thing could happen. Disc could slip, you get T-boned, a dog could run, bite you in the crotch. Like, and there's risk associated with everything, but like understanding, okay, have I done the work to mitigate as much as is foreseeable? And if so, like, and there's limited downside and tremendous upside, I'll go all in on that stuff, man. Like, if you're like, the worst thing that's gonna happen is I'm gonna lose half a year's salary, but I might be able to double or triple that. Like, you know, I say go for it, right?
Hmm.
Because especially like, nowadays, I think people are less conservative, and so we, in the long run, I think feel more regretful for the things that we didn't do versus the things we did do, right? Like, I don't know, I'm bad for this. I always look at like the stock I sold 6 months later to be like, huh, I wonder what happened. And like half the time you're right and half the time you're wrong, right? So it's like I think just keep focused in the present with an eye on the future and forget about the past.
I like it. Like I've definitely had my share of lessons in the stock market. I've had some that have done really well, and then I've had some that have basically deleted themselves with how poorly they performed. And the best mindset shift that I've made is understanding like not all things grow at the same pace. Not all opportunities are like long term. Sometimes there are such things as a short term opportunity, and it's simply like an application of your like when I apply some industry knowledge to certain things, or maybe I apply like what I have learned about an industry, then that seems to give me an edge. And so I'm always continuing to learn. And I have a lot of clients where it's like we just talk shop about like what they're investing in or what they know about different fields or different industries, stuff like that, without it being insider trading. But when it's just like understanding how things work and being curious and always learning. Now, one of the things you've always been great for, because I'm thinking back to some of our past visits, like where we're not recording the conversation, whether it be, I think I got to drive you downtown one time. There was another instance where I drove you to your place from the airport. So we've had some good conversations. And you've always been good for consuming books. And I can only imagine you've probably gone through a lot of books in this time that's passed. What have been some of that have stood out to you?
Oh boy, you're calling me on my shit here. It's actually been a minute since I've had a really good reading regime. I think at the time, like back when those conversations were being had with us, that was something I really needed. A, because I was kind of refocusing, trying to like reshift my mindset and build some of the skills and thought patterns that were going to help me be successful. The other part of it is I just had more time, right? Like it was like one project at a time, and now it's 4 or 5. So, I had the wherewithal to at least fill that spare time with positive stuff. But this is bad. I'm looking at my list because I keep track of every book I read, but I only put it in the list once I finished it. And I know for a fact there's a number of like half finished books. One I'm reading right now is called Awareness by Anthony DeMello or D'Angelo. And it's kind of a weird read. It's read, I think it's like the transcript from a talk he delivered or a series of talks. So it reads like someone is like speaking to an audience, even in that like, the candor of it. So it's kind of a weird one. And it's all about just like, it's kind of like a mix of Buddhism and Stoicism altogether. So I've been struggling to get through that one. It's only 180 pages, but I'm like 130 in and I'm pot committed at this point. But I picked up some good things overall. I mean, I'll always sort of defer back to a few of my favorites, which is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. That was sort of my first brush with Stoic philosophy, and he does a great job of putting it in a modern context. Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership. I mean, that was one of the first books. Actually, that is the first book I ever put on this list. And I gave it a 10 out of 10. And apparently Nico Leiterman from Joey's has it. So I'm putting Nico on blast because I keep track of if I lent it to someone. But no, I find myself reading a lot more like email newsletters nowadays. Like got it, Popliano, an investment one, another one called Bowtie Bulls. Just sort of more of that shorter form. Even the Daily Stoic is a good one. No matter how busy I am, I try and read through that. It takes a few minutes. But yeah, no, you called me. It's been a minute. I've got a few on the desk next to me that are in the queue that I'm excited about. But as life happens, you just have to make sacrifices. And for me, gym's not a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Over the winters, I play men's league hockey still, so that's once or twice a week. And yeah, sadly, the books and the podcasting have fallen by the wayside.
I mean, I value your transparency and all of that. One thing that I picked up as you're answering your question from before, you talked about Stephen Pressfield's writing. So have you been able to finish any of his books, or are those partial ones that you're kind of digging through halfway?
Just the War of Art. That one I finished in 2017,
Hmm.
and that was recommended to me by Adam Scorgi. First time I met him, actually. I was kind of in podcast interviewer mode, and so I was like, if there's one book he could recommend to someone that was valuable to this career filmmaking, what would it be? And he said that one, and so I picked it up and read it right away within a couple of days to like truthfully like to learn, but also to impress him and show that little bit of ambition, right, and the self-startedness. And then I've heard him recommended like 100 times. Oh my God, he's got the one book he keeps recommending, but it's a good one. Like it's great. And for anyone who struggled with procrastination, like I have, like all through schooling, both, secondary and post-secondary, I was like, God, I wish I read this, back in high school.
Yeah,
And sure, I'm sure it's worth rereading as well, because one thing I'm becoming a little more aware of is like, I've already found a ton of books that work for me, right? And, as the years go on and you talk to people about them, you start to kind of just get caught in that echo chamber of the same stories and messages from those books. And so I feel like we sacrifice depth for breadth, right? Like some people are like super proud of the fact they read, 12 new books a year, one a month or something like that, which is great. But I think a lot of us could be serviced better by finding the ones you like and just going back to them yearly, if not even like twice a year, right? Just like bury those into your psyche.
absolutely. And there's a lot of things tied to the reading of books that I think is important. So one of the first things is like when I stumbled across Stephen Pressfield's stuff, it's actually because I had already started producing Andrew Coates' podcast, and I had talked to him about how I was in the works of making a course for people who wanted to start their podcast. And I basically called it How to Keep Going Past 12 Episodes. I think the title might be worded differently, but essentially it has like all the tools that I would put into my own workflow, plus all the lessons that I've learned over the past like nearly a decade of like just working with tech and media and editing and all that stuff. And some of it isn't even like the skills that people would think. Like they're probably looking at it and thinking like, oh, well, like I have the AI tools, so I don't even need to worry about like I can just speed past you. But the thing is that I have like the life experience and the repetitions that can teach them how to make something last, that can teach them how to make it actually a utility and not just fluff. And in the process of that, I had so much like self-doubt. And so I had a good chat with Andrew, and he recommended a few different Stephen Pressfield books. And then from that, and I was listening to these on Audible because sometimes I cheat my way through consuming the book. And I was going on a trip to Jasper. It was for my birthday this past February, where I just take myself to a cabin and just enjoy life. And I just breezed through book after book after book. And it taught me so much more about how I was kind of like showing up to my goals, how I perceived myself, how I was kind of my own biggest limiter or my own biggest critic. And it bridges really well with something that I've been learning myself as of late. And that's how to understand like other people's support. Like for myself, I'm very self-critical. If somebody says that I did good or that anything positive, then I almost think that like somebody put them up to it. Because I'm like, I haven't done enough
Mm.
to deserve that accolade, or like there's somebody better. And so I've sort of struggled with that. So like even when I received praise and somebody's like, oh, he's getting praise, he must feel really good, I would still be like critical of myself and thinking, what more should I do to really deserve that? And lately I've been learning to like understand like most support that I receive is very much merit based. And the last several years, there's been a lot of things that I've put into my work that have kind of earned this, but it's been a huge mindset shift for me. So then for you, within your work, when you talk about the reception of different films, whether it was like a really profitable film or a really well received film critically, what's your experience with people's positive feedback? What's your experience with just like when people have said that you've made it? Are you able to receive that fully? Do you struggle with that? What's that like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like the more secure you are in your work, the less that outside stuff really matters. Like I remember being like just getting started, and if we had an announcement come out, I'd pull it up, I'd go Control F, try and find my name in there. Like, did I get mentioned? Right? Like it was all like it came from a place of like deep insecurity of like I want to be the guy, I want to be the lead guy, or want to be known for this, but eventually you get to a place where you just know the process. So in film specifically, everything from development through to final delivery and broadcast and premiere stuff, you know that all so well that you kind of like know you did your best job. So like, going and Googling your name to see if you're mentioned in the latest press release about it, like it becomes more inconsequential. And I find like, if someone says good work and I know I did my best and I know I busted ass for that, then I'm happy about that. I'm like, thank you, I appreciate it. Thinking to myself, I worked hard for that, right? But sometimes like, we're not always 100% of the time. And sometimes you can be critical on your stuff and know like I could have done that better or whatever. But you also just have to let it go to a degree because people don't know what you don't show them, right?
Mhm.
And some directors and editors are better at understanding this than others, right? Like, oh, this segment has to be in this film, and like the story has to be in the film. But if it's not 100% necessary to drive the story forward, oftentimes we're at a time constraint, right? It's like our rough cuts are 3, 4 times the length of what the finished product is, and every film's got its particular length where it doesn't feel rushed, but it also doesn't feel, drawn out. So there's a sweet spot. So often we're always battling to trim away and trim away until it's all like a tight hour and a half, like 90 to 110 minutes. And just being through that process, again, it comes down to experience of knowing like this shit doesn't matter. Like, it's do your best, like, but little technical issues, like sure, you want everything to be perfect, but perfection is uh, the stall of progress. And so you pick your balance. What is what it kind of comes down to. You realize what's a non-negotiable, what has to be dealt with, and what you can let slide.
Yeah, I mean, like something that I'm leaning into is, I guess, like the best analogy that I can use is like I'm making sure that the best parts get put into the film, as it were, like as I portray myself. I'm making sure that like my skill set and my experiences are woven in because it used to be something that I was like, yeah, yeah, but it's no big deal. But now I'm realizing like most people don't know all the ways that I can help them. And then from another angle, I really like what you brought up about the perfection thing because I think that that stops people from getting like the best human experience they could possibly have. And I'm going to use an example and I'm going to switch up what that example is to not call anybody out. But essentially, some people might have a vision to like build a garage one day and they'll be like, but I can't build the garage until I have like this perfect door, or I can't build the garage until I have the exact right amount of money for that garage. But they're kind of forgetting how many variables are in play, and they keep like moving the goalposts, and then all of a sudden, like 2 decades goes by, and they don't have this garage, and they were sitting next to this pile of dirt, and it's because they had to have it perfect that they deprived themselves of this experience and nobody else has to pay that penalty aside from them. They're the ones with their vehicle out in the cold. They're the ones with this eyesore that they look at when they look out the window. And I think the same can be said for anything to do with like how we go about our day, like career changes, like people like I can't do that until I have this perfect parachute. Like there's no perfect parachute. Even in the job when you're gainfully employed, we are all just like one bad circumstance away from being like laid off or away from like the company having some crazy crisis and just folding. And so we might as well choose things that light us up. But with that said, there's one more thing that I'm going to actually two more things, but the second last thing that I'm going to ask you about is of all the stories that you've had a part in telling, what's one that is yet to be planned? It's not even a thing. It's not written out. It's not mapped out. that you think needs to be told?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one, right? Like I'm just kind of we're sort of like just bearing down right now with managing what we have. I've always liked there's a couple maybe. I've always liked the idea of, and I don't know if it fits in a documentary format so much as like a reality kind of factual, they call it now. Like there's these shows like, Highway to Hell or Deep Sea Fishers or whatever. They're technically not reality shows because I think that term is getting put up to pasture, but they follow people and their daily lives and stuff. I always thought the intersection of like athletes from different sports would be interesting. Just having them like talk about growing up, talk about the system that they developed through, talking about what their in season and off season training looks like, what their diet looks like, talk about like the pressure, the grind of the season, right? Like it's so different for sports like hockey and basketball. You've got sort of that 80 to 82 game season where it's grueling, but then MLB, it's like 160 games. And then NFL, it's like 16 games in the regular season, right? And it's a shorter season. So I always thought that would be kind of interesting comparing and contrasting experiences of different pro athletes. I mean, shit, you could even like bring in Olympic athletes. I know like some of the more expensive winter sports are an absolute grind on the athletes. Like they have to fundraise, like bobsledders, like they have to buy their own slice. Team Canada doesn't supply that, so you have to find sponsors, you have to find investors, and like doing that really becomes a business, all just for the honor of representing your country, which is kind of wild. So, and then, comparing and contrasting the winter and summer Olympics athletes, like summer, like they call the summer Olympics, like the glamour Olympics, right, guys? Especially the runners, they show up, they got their shorts and their spikes and like, nice weather. Whereas like the winter athletes are running up to the hill with all their gear, their sleds, their runners, everything. So I thought that would be kind of fun. That'd be in the sort of like fun sport entertainment world that we've really been in for a while with our work. But then there's the other side of it, the more sort of like socio-political or like topic-based documentaries. And I think like I've always been fascinated by psychology. So something along the lines of like learning the way the brain processes information, how to optimize human performance on like a physiological level, and how do the technological trends of our world impact this hardware that's outdated more or less, to speak. Like we're biologically programmed for a world much in the past from where we are now. So, I mean, I know there's been stuff done on it before, like the what's it called, the social experiment or the social dilemma, right? Like that was really interesting, but that was really like hyper focused on social media and how it impacts people. So I always thought there's a bit of a place for something there, but kind of back to trying to be like water, just sort of going with, I hate to call it this because it's reductive, but the low hanging fruit, right? Like find some interesting or inspiring athletes that haven't had their story told yet, or find some that have some culturally significant thing, like our newest film, Sings in the Ring. Like it's about an Indian immigrant to Canada in the 60s who went on to become one of the, most beloved stars of Stampede Wrestling. And he actually forgoed fame and fortune in the WWF to stay home with his family in Calgary and just be a part of Stampede Wrestling. And you've got a whole generation of immigrant kids growing up in Canada who looked at him as their idol at a time when there weren't, in his case, brown or another brown athletes really represented, or at least not like televised. So yeah, really cool to be part of that, telling that story and seeing what an impact that's had on so many people, like millions of people in this country come from other places. And then at a time too, like it's kind of apropos at this moment because there's so much tension on immigration and racial divide. So it's fun to be able to this is one season. The Ring is a story about goodness as opposed to greatness,
Mm,
like he could have been great, but instead he decided to be good. And that's really heartwarming for us.
I like that. That was a good segue because I want you to take this opportunity to tell my audience about how they might be able to see some of the upcoming premieres attached to some of the films you're involved with, how they can be part of your world, stuff like that.
Yeah, so best thing to do is go to Scorgy Productions. That's SCOREG Productions.co. Sign up for our newsletter. I know it's outdated having like an email newsletter, but that's where we blast out all this stuff. So we've got 2 films premiering at the Calgary Film Festival and the Edmonton Film Festival. It's kind of cool. They're each like being the opening gala film. So first one is Biff Naked. So we told her story, Canadian alt-rock star, absolute sweetheart of a person, was kind of one of the first like big time female kind of hardcore rockers that broke out, and her story and what she's had to overcome. It's just monumental. So that's premiering at the Calgary Film Festival on September 18th. And then Sings in the Ring, the story I just mentioned, will be also premiering at the Calgary Film Festival on September 24th. Then the next night, September 25th, it's opening the Edmonton Film Festival. And then the following night on September 26th, Biff Naked will be at the Edmonton Film Festival. So we got 2 films, 2 film festivals in 1 week.
Love
So
it.
that'd be great. And of course, like my Instagram, which I'm sure you can put in the description, and Adam's Instagram. It's always a good way. We like posting about our work because we love what we do, and people seem to like when we share it.
Nice. And then I have one last question for you because we talked about books, and I'm finding people have different perceptions of the power of books, the purpose of books, stuff like that. And I wonder, would you ever write a book about everything that you've experienced, or is that something that you leave to somebody else?
Probably haven't taken detailed enough notes or journals to write like a real good recap of my life. On that note, I did. There was a time where I did, like, even if it was one sentence, sometimes it was a couple paragraphs, but I would journal every single night. And it's such a treasure trove to be able to go back and read. I don't do it often, but sometimes it's in one long note. Sometimes I go Control F to find different names and the last time I saw them or whatever. But no, I don't think my life is telling other people's stories. So I don't think my life's all that interesting, at least not in a book format. What I've considered doing is potentially taking my 99 episodes of City Champions podcast, rounding it out with a 100th episode that maybe I'm the guest on and someone guest interviews me, and then turning that into like a 100-chapter book on, each chapter would only be a couple pages on, what that episode was about, who the person is, and kind of key takeaways, similar to what you're doing with the Substack, which is
Yeah.
putting you a bit of a self-published book. But yeah, I don't, maybe too much time has passed because I think my last episode was like 4 years ago.
Well, I mean, I'll challenge you to say I don't think too much time has passed. I think you can reconnect at any point. It's very similar to we've seen lots of bands that like All American Rejects, they were gone and now they're back again. Like there's lots of examples where people will prove what's worthwhile. And I mean, if you just turn the podcast episodes into a book and just self-published on Amazon, I'd buy the book.
Yeah, well, you can always add author to your little resume bio, whatever,
Yeah,
right? Bit of a
yeah.
hack.
But all that said, I just want to thank you so much for making time for me today because I know as our lives evolve, time changes, and you were still able to sit down with me today. So thanks for being back on the show, Shane.
Yeah, of course, my pleasure. And let me know who's ahead of me in terms of times on the show, because I'm a competitive person to a degree. So if you ever need a fill in, I'm more than happy to jump in and we can go off on different tangents anytime.
Love it.